cure for this one. There's no cure for this one.
Welcome back to episode 2 of the MuscleTV podcast. I am joined here, as always, by my good friend, Mr. Luke Schembri. Welcome, Luke.
Welcome, Scotty. How you going, mate? It's good to be back.
I'm doing well, mate. I'm doing well. And today we are going to talk about one of our favourite topics, certainly a favourite topic back in the day. We're going to talk about muscle growth and how to maximise it and what you can expect and the best ways to go about it. So where do you think we should kick this one off, Luke? Because it's a very multifaceted dilemma, I guess. If you're looking to get to the gym and you build yourself some muscle, it can be a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people. There's a lot of information out there, and we really want to sort of bring it back to basics and touch on the most important aspects. So if we're to talk training, because I guess that is the catalyst for all of this, what are some of your most basic recommendations to someone who's perhaps new to the gym?
Well, I think if you're new to the gym, you're in for a surprise. If you're consistent with your training, even if it's not to the highest standard and you mightn't have the best form and you don't particularly know what you're doing, just doing something that is more physically demanding than what your body is used to, you're going to see some amazing results. So, early on, it's just getting to the gym. It's just literally walking in the door for the gym. And look, that can be a barrier for people. They don't want to go into the gym. They don't want to start. But if you're inside the gym and you're young and you're keen and you're just playing around with weights, that first year or two can be absolutely amazing. And look, the main consideration, in my opinion, would be just to stay injury-free, just to have fun, play around with lots of different machines and enjoy that early growth, which you can never really match again. But again, the big key consideration is staying injury-free. Like, there's a lot of people in the gym who has poor technique, and you can read lots of different stuff online and you can sort of get caught up in it all very early on. But I just think it's just kicking off, making sure you don't hurt yourself and just having fun and enjoy those first couple of years, because I tell you what, they don't come back.
No, they do not. But I think you're absolutely correct. Like, weight training, like any new endeavor, there is a period of skill acquisition, and weight training does require some skill. So it is important that you take your time and you learn the movements correctly, because if you start learning incorrect movement patterns, that can flow on and impact your training at a later date. And sometimes, not sometimes, but oftentimes that can become the cause of injuries and imbalances and things of that nature. So I think taking your time once you first get into the gym and understanding that you are new and there will be a period where you have to focus on technique and learning, it is obviously a very sort of wise way to go about it, rather than throwing yourself in probably the way we did when we were 14 years old and just starting with a 1 rep max bench press. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to get online and look at what they're doing. I mean, there's lots of resources out there for people these days when it comes to online coaching and programming, where you can access the movements themselves and see how they're meant to be correctly performed. Start off light, stay injury free, build those good habits. And I think one of the first words you said, Luke, was consistency. And if there is something that needs to be focused on, it is that consistency of effort. You can take, steps forward, but you can also take steps backwards rather quickly if you do get injured or you take a few weeks off, and it's just like starting all over again. So if it is something that you want to pursue and pursue to a high level, the best athletes aren't necessarily the most intense. They aren't necessarily the strongest. They are generally the most consistent. And I see that time and time again amongst my client base, that the ones that never go backwards are the ones that end up the furthest forwards.
100%. And you touched on saying there, Scotty, about the physical skill involved, because, I mean, anyone can go into a gym and pick up a weight. Any meathead can. But to perform a set movement pattern, hitting target muscle groups, generating as much force as possible, staying within those ranges of movements and having good form, like, that takes years. I mean, that's how you get stronger, isn't it? It's that neurological sort of improvements in efficiency, the brain talking to the muscles to fire off for a particular movement pattern, generate the maximum amount of force. So that's saying that you can't rush. And early on, when you first go to the gym, you're going to see massive increases in strength, and it's going to come about primarily just because you're getting good at those movement patterns very quickly. So I think you really hit something on the nail on the head there, Scotty, when it was about that skill acquisition. Early on, for the first couple of years, really watching your form and your technique, that is absolutely critical. I mean, I would have hated to have been someone who started the gym around the time when Ronnie Coleman's Cost of Redemption came out, and you've watched that, and then you've gone in and loaded up the leg press with 1,000 kilos or whatever it was, and 8 plates aside on the squat. See, Ronnie probably wasn't the best person to be watching for the form and the technique, and I think that's where some people can get in trouble because a very, very, very experienced trainer or bodybuilder is not always the best person to watch what they're doing, not because necessarily their technique's bad, but they're doing what has always worked for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you or it works for everybody else. So, yeah, really early on, just focusing on that technique and that skill acquisition, I think that is the most critical thing if you're starting out in the gym.
I agree, and a lot of people will have a very individual level of sort of kinesthetic awareness in terms of where their body is positioned in space. And for those which are naturally athletic, perhaps been athletes their entire lives, they will pick it up a little bit faster. And typically they can gravitate more towards complex movements and perhaps free weight movements. But if you're not feeling confident, there's a lot of evidence now that will show that machine work is every bit as good as free weight work when it comes to building muscle tissue. So in the past, there might have been a bit of a stigma, certainly amongst the bodybuilding meathead community, that you had to get big and strong at the main compound lifts and you had to use heavy barbells and dumbbells and things of that nature. But the evidence is now showing us that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, that might technically translate into more functional strength. And if you're looking to take your bodybuilding progression and your muscularity and integrate that into a more dynamic physical activity, another sport, then perhaps the free weights are the way to go. But if you're looking to build muscle and do so safely, you can certainly utilize a lot of the machines which are on the market these days and see incredible improvements. So for those that are a little bit uncomfortable perhaps when they get to the gym, you don't have to load that barbell up and throw it on your back and struggle to figure out a squat. You can learn it on a hack squat machine. You can jump on the leg press and you can absolutely get very similar, if not even superior results under some circumstances, especially if that movement is safer for you. Now, we certainly grew up in the meathead era, where it was all about going heavy and it was all about lifting big free weights. And I must admit, I still think there's a place for that, but I think that the place for that is the young guys, because, when you're 17 or 18 and you do feel like you're almost invincible, you know what, as a 49-year-old man looking back at that, you are almost invincible. Like you can get away with a lot, but it doesn't detract from, or doesn't change the fact that you still need to be paying attention to your technique so that from a longevity standpoint, you can stay in the game a little bit longer. A lot of us, no doubt, learnt from injuries along the way. I'm sure it was a similar case for you, Luke.
100%. So anyone can sort of go into the gym and use machines, I guess, relatively safely, as long as they're sensible and maybe they have some, you go to a gym for the first time, you might get a free PT session or something like that. But if you are looking to incorporate some of the more complex movements, like your free weight squat, like your hip hinge, are you of the opinion, Scotty, that probably the fastest way forward is just to pay for a couple of sessions with a good trainer who knows what they're doing and get that technique, sort of smashed out of the park? And then that's putting you at an advantage because that's sort of the base you're starting at. You're getting your technique right. Because I know my hip hinge and my squat took years and I hurt myself many times and it was uncomfortable. And then, working with someone like Andrew Locke, it just, I went next level when I improved my technique. It was ridiculous. And I wish I had done that earlier. But a lot of people will just sort of get under the bar with a barbell squat or do a hip hinge movement just because they've seen it online. And would you say those two exercises, like a hip hinge movement, like a deadlift and a barbell squat, probably take down more people than any other exercises in the gym? Would you say that's true?
I think that's fairly accurate. Yeah, ironically, it was the bench press for me. Like I could get to the 3-plate bench press, and then there would be shoulder pain. And I literally bench pressed wrong for 18 years. Like I started when I was 14. It was at 32 that I finally got to have a hands-on session with the aforementioned Dr. Andrew Locke, and he taught me how to bench press. So it was like, so I've been doing this wrong for 18 years, and that's why my shoulder hurts every time I get to 3 plates. So yes, I would encourage absolutely everyone to get a session in with a qualified, skilled trainer, because they will be able to, remove all these headaches that we certainly experienced over the years. Ironically, I then attended a seminar with Dr. Andrew Locke and Sebastian Oreb, and they were like bench pressing for power and bench pressing for bodybuilding, and they got me to demonstrate without telling me what was going on. Scott, demonstrate a bench press. And so, all right, I went up there and I was like, all right, it's a big group. All right, I'll demonstrate a bench press. Andrew's taught me how to do it. And Sebastian's like, yeah, so that's okay if you just want big pecs, but if you want to be strong, you need to do it. And I was just like, just making fun of the bodybuilding guy. So there is different lifting protocols for different intentions as well. A powerlifting bench press is ever so slightly different to a bodybuilding bench press where you're trying to isolate the pecs. But if you can relay your goals to a qualified trainer, they should be able to take you down the path of correct practice. And once you've got that technique, what was Andrew's theory? Was it 1,000 repetitions to ingrain a movement pattern? I remember you doing wall
I think it was
squats.
2,000. I'm pretty sure it was 2,000. When I hurt my back in the fire brigade, and then Andrew gave me a rehab protocol where we're doing wall squats, where you're sitting facing the wall, sitting down to the chair. He said 2,000 reps, and I was trying to do about 100 a night. And after the 20 days, my whole hip hinge technique had completely changed. But I think it was about the 2,000 number was what he used to quote as learning the new movement pattern.
Yeah, so let's learn to do things right, and then let's do them correctly 2,000 times in a row so that they become ingrained and they become habitual. And that's probably when you can really start to safely load things up and get after it. But the good thing is, in that initial learning phase, you can still see some pretty outstanding progress in terms of muscle growth. That you do not have to be, pushing impressive weights. Certainly don't compare yourself to others around the gym. Just stick in your lane and try to pursue slow and steady progress. And newbie gains is a very real thing, Luke. I'm sure you still see it with your clients.
Yeah, and the thing is, you like body weight can be a little bit deceiving, because let's say you start in the gym and your body fat levels are a little bit higher, and let's say you drop 10 kilos of body fat, but you put on 10 kilos of muscle over, the space of 18 months to 2 years. That can happen if you're consistent. If you stay injury free, you can certainly expect to see amazing results in the first couple of years. And what I see a lot is people are very disappointed with their scale weight, and they don't factor in that body composition change. If you're increasing lean mass and dropping body fat, it's almost always good. There's no downside to that. The only downside is what shows up on the scales, and that might be limited movement on your scale weight. And I think that's where it's important to use other indicators of your progression and your success to stay motivated. Am I getting stronger in the gym? Am I learning new movement patterns? Is my belt a little bit tighter? Do I look better in the mirror? These are all really, really good signs of progression. So just remember that if you're dropping body fat and you're increasing lean mass, the scale weight's probably not going to reflect that accurately. And so you want to look for other areas of your progression and your success just to reinforce that you are on the right track and you are making amazing progression.
I know when I started out, I was very young when I started lifting, and I was 14, and there was probably natural growth involved in that, which would have taken place whether I was lifting or not. But I was very passionate about it right from the get-go. And I do remember, I honestly believe I put on 8 to 10 kilos of muscle in my first year of training. Now, like I said, there's a hormonal component to that where, you're 14 going on 15, where the testosterone's up there and, the growth hormone's doing its thing. And I probably would have put on, 3 kilos of muscle had I not even resistance trained. But it was a dramatic change to my physique. And as a consequence, it was probably a dramatic change to my confidence levels as well. So I still see that in new clients, and it doesn't matter what age you are. Well, there is an age influence, no doubt. If you pick things up when you're 60 for the first time, you won't progress like a 20-year-old, but you will still see rather rapid progression. And it's probably even more valuable to you as a 60-year-old in terms of, prevention of bone mineral issues, prevention of falls, things that will translate into real life benefits, rather than the purely cosmetic benefits that I was seeking when I was 14, because I thought it would impress girls. It doesn't impress girls, Luke. I up until the age of about, 25, 26, I'm pretty sure the only compliments I got when I went out were from blokes that were drunk that wanted to know how much I could bench press. So don't do it for the girls.
Mate, I found that as I put on a bit more muscle early on, or two things. Number one, I was 19, I was in the Air Force, and I remember the flight sergeant who was in charge of the fire station called me into the office and said, look, steroids are prohibited in the Australian Defence Force. And I'm like, I promise you I'm not. And I ended up going in a natural, well, my first show was the A&B, Australian Natural Bodybuilding. I won Mr. Junior Sydney. And that was my whole time in the Air Force. So they kind of believed me after that. But I was just training and just getting into it and, just making fantastic progression. And literally, I was called into the office from the flight sergeant. He wanted to know, what steroids are you taking? And I was like, no, this is all me at the moment. It really is. So those first few years are absolutely amazing. Also, I do have a lot of people that I work with that are maybe past their 40s, and they're only just getting into resistance training for the first time. Incredible changes. I have seen ridiculous results, like 10 centimeter increase on a male's leg measurement after a number of years because they've just started the resistance training. So there's never a bad time to start resistance training and try to develop muscle mass. Even if you don't want to be a bodybuilder, you just want to increase your lean tissue a bit. There's so many benefits. It increases your metabolic rate, improves insulin sensitivity, reduces chances of disease. Like you said, bone mineral density, self-confidence, like I'm looking better and I'm feeling better about myself. There is no downside. Even though I don't do as much resistance training as what I used to do back in the day, it's still probably the number one thing that in terms of time and benefit that you can get back when it comes to compositional changes.
Absolutely. I think they're linking a lot of sort of age-related factors to the diminishing muscle mass. So if you can do your best to maintain your muscle mass as you age, you do reduce a lot of these sort of age-related risk factors. And certainly just regular exercise as a whole is incredibly beneficial for longevity. So if we've gone in, we've learned our technique in the gym. Now we're slowly escalating our intensity. And we sort of seeking progression. Perhaps we're through the newbie gains phase. Now, how are we trying to maximize our progression, Luke? It's probably time to delve into some of the nutritional aspects of things, because in the beginning, you can gain while in a calorie deficit. You can build muscle. Like you can break some of the laws of physiology which apply to the more experienced lifter. You can gain while at maintenance. You'll probably gain ever so slightly fast if you are in a surplus. But once you become an advanced lifter and you're starting to approach your genetic potential and things start to slow down, you have to look beyond just the training alone. What would be the big ticket items for you and your clients when they've got through that first year, 18 months, and the newbie gains have come to an end?
I think, mate, it's the lifestyle factors. I think there's two things that people tend to underestimate if they're beginning a new adventure in fitness. Number one, that's the initial difficulty of what they're trying to pursue. And getting over that speed hump can be difficult. Just going into the gym today and training at a very high intensity or putting in a lot of effort, like that can be a roadblock for people. It's like, I couldn't think of anything worse, it's like, oh, it's terrible. But then the ongoing nature of the effort tends to surprise people. And I see that, 18 months, 2 years, it's just, this is the grind now. Those initial fantastic results have slowed. They don't stop, they don't turn off, but they have slowed. I'm in the grind. I've got to go to work. Maybe I've got to go to uni. Maybe I've got kids. Maybe I've been sick. I'm injured. I'm tired. Meal prep. When do I fit that in? So the lifestyle factors, I think, is just as a general sort of consideration, I find to be one of the main hurdles that comes about after the 18 months to 2 years. There's no off date. If I want to keep progressing, then I can't stop with this. I've just got to keep it up. How do I make that work with my life and my lifestyle? And probably the one that I see time and time again is nutrition. I mean, nutrition's just hard. I still struggle to this day. I mean, I love cooking. We eat well, but it's a never-ending, relentless beast. You get meal prep done maybe for a couple of days, and then you've got to do it again and get the shopping and actually cook that and fit that in. And so that tends to be one of the biggest challenges, the ongoing nature of the pursuit, in the sense that it's just all time and effort and trying to manage that. And if you can find a happy balance where I can sustain my efforts and the efforts are at a certain intensity and to a certain degree, then there's no off date in terms of the results. Things slow down and things become more difficult, but it doesn't turn off at any time.
I deal primarily with a highly motivated client base there. I'm almost exclusively coaching competitive bodybuilders. So I very rarely need to motivate them. But what I have found is that, again, even within that community, it is the consistency that leads to the best results. And the only way you can have consistency is with a sustainable approach. So you might look at the optimal research when it comes to muscle growth and determine that you need to be in the gym 5 days a week. But if your lifestyle dictates that that's going to impose a whole lot of additional stress on you in terms of, you know, your marriage or your work, or you're going to have to compromise sleep or something like that, it is ultimately an unsustainable approach. So I encourage all of my athletes, which are striving to be the absolute best, and they are often working their life around their bodybuilding, whereas the vast majority of people have to fit their bodybuilding around their life. I still encourage them at times to take a step back and acknowledge that perhaps we're approaching something in an unsustainable manner. And if that's the case, eventually they're going to either burn out, build resentment to it, be set back in terms of injuries, illness, overtraining, all of those sorts of issues. So for a lot of people, they might look at maybe an influencer online, which has a completely different lifestyle to them, and they're getting up at 4:30 a.m. and they're training hard, and they're doing a cryo session, and they're getting some deep tissue work done and all this sort of stuff. And because of that, they're optimizing their recovery, and they have the capacity to train at a volume and frequency that the everyday person would not. And they think they're failing, but the reality is you're not failing. Like, you just need to come up with a protocol or a plan which is sustainable within your lifestyle. You can train as much as you can recover, and those lifestyle factors are going to heavily influence your recovery. So if you can't feasibly get into the gym 4 days a week, cool, let's come up with a great 3 day a week plan, because maybe the progression won't be as fast as that of a professional athlete, but there'll still be progression there. And it's the same approach when it comes to nutrition. Like, if I have clients come on board and I think, I like to eat 6 times a day and have protein at every meal. And, I like to cook my meals fresh and all this sort of stuff. And I was to apply that to a incredibly a successful businessman who just does not have the capacity to do that, he is going to fail. And I think if you're setting yourself up for failure, or as a coach, you're setting your clients up for failure, they're only going to be able to go so far. So I'm a big believer in preaching for a sustainable approach to muscle growth, both in terms of training and in terms of nutrition. But if we do get back to the sort of the core nutritional principles, once you have reached the intermediate to advanced level, you've gotten through the newbie gain phase. From the standpoint of building muscle tissue, you kind of do need a calorie surplus, don't you, Luke?
Yeah, you definitely need a calorie surplus, and it doesn't have to be, I guess, what we did back in the day, Scotty. I'd blow out like 25 kilos in the off season, and like I said before, did it primarily on takeaway and just ultra processed foods, and did it in a terrible way. But being in a surplus is absolutely critical for an advanced bodybuilder. I believe it's like 10, maybe 15% surplus is all you need to continue with the muscle growth, maybe even 20%. But there's no need to go for a super huge calorie surplus. More to the point, if that's just accruing visceral body fat, then the negative effects that come about with visceral body fat, you can't overlook that when it comes to bodybuilding in general. I mean, systemic inflammation that can be a precursor to all of the diseases, lifestyle diseases we're trying to avoid. Problems with insulin sensitivity, so you can't control blood sugar as well. Mental health, cognitive function, all of this can go down south very, very quickly when visceral body fat creeps up. And visceral body fat is that body fat in between the organs that you see, sort of like that beer belly at the front. So ensuring that you're in a surplus is critical for continuing to put on lean mass. You don't need to be in a massive surplus. Everyone's an individual. I've helped some people who have been able to grow and they're only on maybe like males, and they've got plenty of muscle mass, and 3,500 calories for them is heaps because they don't have an active job. They're sedentary. They go to the gym. It's the off-season cardio is a bit lower, so their overall calorie expenditure is not as great. But then I have people who have very physically active jobs, concreters and brickies and things like that. And so to get them in a surplus, they need to be having literally 5,000 calories just to sort of get over. So having a calorie surplus would be one of the main considerations, but the quality of the food that you're eating, so that you are able to get high quality protein, and we're looking for fiber and micronutrients and things like that. That becomes a very important consideration if you're trying to stay healthy and perform at an optimal level. I certainly was not performing at an optimal level when I was bodybuilding, and I've learnt my lesson, but it certainly is not something I would recommend for people to try, just to put down as many calories as possible, as simply as possible.
I came from the same school of thought of you as the faster I can put the weight on, the more muscle will come on. And as a consequence, I would get rather large in my off seasons. But now, as I explain to my athletes, if you gain on average 100 grams a week, that's 5 kilos in a year. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to put on 5 kilos in a year once you've got through that beginner phase. So that is still at a rate which will optimize muscle growth. And if you can optimize muscle growth while minimizing fat gain, it will certainly improve your composition and appearance, but it's going to be a healthier approach as well. So it's very, very hard to perfectly regulate energy balance to that degree. And there's so many variables that will impact scale weight. It's never going to go up a linear 100 grams a week, but that's sort of what you're looking for. Maybe half a kilo a month, or thereabouts is really all you need. Now, again, it sort of comes down to consistency. If you look at the half a kilo weight gain per month, and if all of that comes on in the weekend surplus, and none of it happens during the week, you are not driving anabolism nearly as consistently as you are if you were to maintain that small surplus 7 days of the week. So there does need to be a level of nutritional accountability if you are to look to optimize your progress. And that is normally the big next step for most of those that are aspiring to build a fantastic physique. You get the good training habits down. Now you have to get the good nutritional habits down. And for a lot of people, that could mean tracking their macros in a MyFitnessPal or a similar app. It might mean that someone has provided you with a food plan of sorts. But again, there's no 100% correct way to go about it. The correct way to go about it is the way that fits within your lifestyle. And in terms of nutritional hierarchy, I generally explain to my clients, it's calorie surplus first, it's protein intake second, because that protein is that building blocks of muscle tissue. And then it's the stuff that keeps you healthy is the next thing on there, because the stuff that keeps you healthy is going to lead to far better longevity. Once again, I come back to that terminology. And a healthy body is always going to build muscle much, much faster than an unhealthy body. So I think while it can, again, seem daunting, much like anything within this space, if you just follow that edict of, am I eating enough food? Am I eating enough protein? Am I eating enough fiber, good fats, micronutrients? I'm good. Is it sustainable? Carry on.
Yep, completely agree. And mate, just on that about sort of sustainability and being flexible in your approach. So, we know if we're measuring foods, raw weights, measuring your raw weight first is going to be closer in terms of the nutritional accuracy, because no matter what your cooking method is, whether it loses water or gains water, it doesn't matter. But for a lot of people that I help, they've got families. And so cooking individual meals completely with raw weights, they have to have separate food to the family, and it doesn't work. It's not going to work in the long term. They're just not motivated to do that. It's too difficult. So the price that we pay for a little bit of convenience is, all right, maybe cook up that kilo of chicken breast, don't weigh it, put it in a container. When it's dinner time, take it out of the container, weigh it then, because then other family members also have chicken breast. And then maybe you've got a big container of rice and a big container of potato. And sure, it's not quite as accurate as measuring with the raw weights. However, I can maintain this consistently. I can get, 90%, I can get within 90% of my targets, but I can do that 100% of the time, rather than aiming for perfect targets and maybe only being able to do that for short periods of time because I lose motivation. It's not sustainable. And, I've got other commitments in life. So that would be just what I consider to be a really good example about being flexible in your approach, with that idea that sustainability in the long term is going to see the best results. Increasing lean muscle mass in the long term, that's where you see the best results. And so you need to think, how do I make my day-to-day life easier? Raw weights, yes, it's more accurate, and if I can cook with that, perfect, if I can measure that. But if I've got a family and I'm cooking, big batches of food, maybe having a smorgasbord or a buffet at dinner where all the family can pick and choose what they want, and that way we're not doing two separate sort of cook-ups, one for myself and one for the family, that's something, in terms of flexibility, with the idea that sustainability being the main goal.
Completely agree. And when it comes to the nutritional side, you have to tick off the big ticket items that we've already addressed. But some people seem to focus on the one percenters much more than anything else. And you've owned a supplement shop. I've owned a supplement shop. You've probably seen some young, enthusiastic guys come in there, have a look around, think this is the answer to all of my issues. What am I going to buy in here? And what supplements would you recommend for them, Luke?
Well, mate, Max's protein, of course. I mean, look, they're the sponsor of this show, but it's the number one bodybuilding supplement for me, and has been for my whole career, is protein powder. Whether it was a mass gainer in the early days, or I used to have a slow-acting nighttime one sometimes before bed. At the moment, it's just WPI. It's fantastic. Like, it's safe, it's effective, and it's a great way for contributing towards your daily protein target. And especially with say WPI, I'll blend it up with some black chia seeds and some LSA, so some high fiber options, some frozen berries, a bit of peanut butter, some good fats. Like, that's an absolute powerhouse of a meal. So, whey protein, or protein powder in general, it is the number one supplement. It's tried, tested, it's safe, it's very, very effective. You can't go wrong with it. In a very close number two, I would put creatine monohydrate. Same deal. It is well established that it's effective. Like, if you load, or if you do a period of time with creatine and you reach that muscle saturation point, you can see 10 to 15% increase in your maximum sets in terms of power and strength and speed. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not like a small amount. So you're crazy not to be on creatine. And even with creatine now, the emerging studies coming out about, improving cognitive function, protecting the brain. I was reading one the other week, and I'm going to butcher it, but anyway, they're looking at people that had like sleep deprivation, and they were given a 15-gram dose of creatine monohydrate, and then a couple of hours later they had to do a memory test. And the people that had the creatine, like, it was saying like 50% or something that they improved on the score. So anyway, protein powder and creatine, don't even think about it. Like, just use them. Protein powder saves you time with your meal prep. You don't have to cook up as much protein. And creatine for those benefits, like, it just directly improves your overall athletic performance.
I agree completely. I don't feel I need to add anything more to that. But if we're talking about convenience and sustainability, there's nothing more convenient than a good protein powder. And, they taste pretty good these days. It's easy, it's portable. And I guess from an ideal perspective, if we're going optimal again, you want to get 4 serves of protein per day. And it's the rare individual that wants to have, 4 serves of chicken per day, or 4 serves of red meat or fish per day. So a shake or two is going to do the job. And it's an incredibly high quality source of protein, high in leucine, which is the catalyst for triggering protein synthesis pathway. So absolutely, if you're not taking away protein, you're probably just making your life a little bit more difficult. To be fair, you can still make progress without it, but geez, I don't know, it tastes a lot better, and it's a lot more convenient than a lot of the other protein sources out there. I guess a topic that many people would probably like to touch on would be performance-enhancing drugs, Luke. Something that you'd be probably incredibly unfamiliar with and completely in the dark. So I don't know if you've done any research on this topic and what you could add to this conversation.
Mate, I've done some research over the years in this topic. So, look, I guess it comes down to a few things. I mean, number one, are you competing in a tested sport? If you're competing in a tested sport and you're taking PEDs, you're cheating. So it's as simple as that. It's pretty cut and dry, and I do feel pretty strongly about that. If you're looking for PEDs to maximize lean muscle mass, I mean, look, testosterone as an example, if you're increasing your testosterone levels, you see big increases in muscle protein synthesis, you see increases in muscle contractile strength. So, it would be we'd be lying if we said that PEDs weren't a big part of increasing lean muscle. But the question is, how big do you actually want to get? Are you going to run some PEDs just because you're in a rush? I'm just going to take something and I'm going to go out and party on the weekend, and I'm not going to worry about my nutrition, and I'm going to do half-ass training. I'm not going to train legs or anything like that. Or do you have all that squared away and you're looking to take things to the next level? You have made a risk assessment. It's something that you're willing to do. You sort of, you've made the decision that you want to take things next level. I mean, it's, if you have your training in order and your nutrition in order, then PEDs, they have a place in increasing lean muscle, but it really is a personal preference. And one thing I'd say about that is, like, how big do you want to get? That's the question. If you just want to have some good muscle size, like look like you train on a regular basis and be strong, and you can do that naturally. You can do that training. You can do that on top of your nutrition, staying injury-free, being consistent, all that good stuff that we said. Like, you really can. And if you're one of those genetic freaks that has, more fast twitch muscle fibers, and maybe you've got a tiny waist structurally and it just looks like you're a monster, you could potentially get everything that you want, not going down the road of PEDs. If you're looking to be an IFBB pro bodybuilder, then that's something you're going to have to consider at some point.
Yes, you most definitely are going to have to consider it at some point. But I think the most important thing you said there is if you've got your training and nutrition in order, because I've had a number of clients which are very, very eager to embark on the performance enhancing route. And if they have not laid the foundations and if they do not have the lifestyle of a bodybuilder in place, well, they might make some fairly rapid progress when they're highly motivated in using their performance enhancing drugs. When they come off them, they will fall back into their old habits and they'll regress it and largely see all those gains completely negated. I've seen that on a number of occasions, even with some of the, the young boys that come through the gym. They might be looking pretty spectacular leading into summer, and then you might not see them all again in winter, and then they re-emerge in spring and they jump back on and they get to it, and they're never really making any forward progress. They're just sort of going up and down in terms of their muscle mass. So lay the foundations, be a highly competent trainer, have great nutritional accountability, be on top of all the lifestyle factors, ensure that your health is in a good place. And then, and only then, if it, aligns with your goals, is it something you should explore. And it is something you should only look into if you have addressed some of the health concerns, if you're willing to get blood work done, if you are willing to, pull back if there are signs of wear and tear on the body, then you probably have the maturity to potentially go down that path. But that might be about all we have time for today, Luke. And hopefully there was something of value within that for our listeners. But I think, if we sort of were to summarize, it would be learn fantastic technique, then slowly escalate your intensity, adopt a sustainable approach to both your training and nutrition, pay attention to the big ticket items, the energy balance, the protein intake, optimize health, optimize your lifestyle, do your best to sleep and recover, and repeat. It always comes down to repeat. If you cannot be consistent, you cannot expect long-term progress. And the only way you can do that is with a sustainable approach that fits within your lifestyle. It really is that simple. So for all those that are listening, please like and subscribe so you get notifications when the new episodes come out. Thank you as always for your time, Luke.
Thank you, Scotty.
It's been a pleasure, and we will see you again soon.
There's no cure for this one.